Good afternoon, class. I am delighted to have before you Dr. Edward Etzel. As you know, he's the author of one of the texts that we use on sport, exercise, and performance psychology. He has an illustrious background, including being a licensed psychologist in West Virginia,
Correct.
a consultant on the U.S. Olympic Committee Sport Psychology Registry. He's been an APA chair for Division 47, the Education Committee there. And really germane to us, he's served as a chair of the AASP Ethics Committee for 9 years.
That's how I got to look like this. I'm only 28.
Oh, wow. How about that? One of the things you said in our conversation before was you said, I've been involved in a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And I didn't know, in addition to any of the things I mentioned about you, where some of that stuff might be interesting to mention.
Well, I started out here as a coach, and I coached 12 years our NCAA rifle team, and our team won 5 NCAA championships. I'm proud of those folks, and I drove the van for that a long time ago and didn't make any money. And one of the reasons I finished graduate school. And I was the psychologist for athletics at West Virginia University for a long time, 1990 till my retirement in 19. And I'm also an Olympic gold medalist. So in Los Angeles in 1984, yes, I am. So
in what field?
In shooting, in rifle shooting. That was what I coached. So
for heaven's sake.
Started out in Boy Scouts and didn't like it, and that's the way the wind blew. So something I did one morning.
In those Olympic trials, you were probably not too far from California Baptist University, because my sons were attendees. They didn't participate, but they were very much involved in riflery and handguns at that time.
Yes.
One of the things you
Chino,
also
that's where
said was that you were aware of the ethical challenges and behavioral issues of sport and performance psychologists. Is there anything you could speak about?
Well, when I was beginning to get involved in ASP professional activities, I'd go to conferences and I'd listen to the things that I had learned in my counseling psych doctoral program that were questionable behaviors. Good example of those, and they probably still happen, is name dropping of clients. That's, as they say in New York, not kosher. And I became more and more interested in not only looking at ethical challenges in professional psychology, but how they manifest themselves in sport and exercise psychology, which is a field back then was like the Wild West. It's sort of still like the Wild West ethically and legally in terms of what people do and what they call themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And so I became concerned about that because I really didn't understand why people didn't quite understand those things. One of my jokes is I proposed a V code for the DSM. That was called People Who Just Don't Get It. And it didn't make it in there. I don't know why, but there's a lot of people that just don't get it. And they still just don't get it. You can go to an ASP conference in Orlando and you'll probably see a lot of the same things. Or poke around on people's websites and see how they portray themselves, and et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, and I was involved with people who were on the ethics committee, and they said, like to become a member?" And I said, "Sure, I'm a glutton for punishment. Why not?" And then I ended up being the chairperson for quite a while, and it was a rewarding experience over that a good bit of time.
You also mentioned
So
that
that's sort of the backstory.
harming people that we're intending to serve is a serious issue for you.
And could you say that again? It was a little bit sketchy on my end with the internet. I'm sorry.
You had mentioned that harming
Oh,
people
yes.
that we are supposed to be serving.
Yes. Well, that's the, that's one of the, is do no harm. That's beneficence. And if we want to pronounce it that way, we're doing no harm. We're trying to benefit our clients, not only, and to do good work. So they go together. They're kissing cousins, as they say in Appalachia. And so, yes, they go together. And so, when we try to encourage people to behave ethically and to learn about what it's like to have an ethical mind and where those sort of lenses, we're generally trying to do good work and to not harm people. That's really that's the high road of the ethics code, and it certainly links to the law as well, which is a whole other realm. But they are clearly related. So.
I have not been absolutely clear about sport and performance psychology and where they are in relation to the law. I'm an MFT and a PCC in California, so I'm real familiar with the laws that we are obligated to follow, but I'm not sure about sport and performance psychology.
Well, what you just mentioned is critical. That people need to know what the law is relative to the practice of psychology or counseling or social work, or marriage and family therapy, medicine, etc., relative to what the practice is, what the scope of practice is, and state legislation has in all states and Canadian provinces indicates the scope of practice, what is considered to be the practice of whatever those professions may be. And also linked to that is what one can call oneself. If you call yourself a counselor, well, you should have you need to have a license. And or you call yourself a psychologist, or you allow someone to call you a sports psychologist, you need to be a psychologist. And that's true across all of the different states and provinces. Historically in the field, people have adopted the sports psychology term, and it can be misleading, especially in terms of service provision or one's portrayal of credentials. So that links to, there's a good example of, here's the law that says XYZ, but also practice that is an ethical sort of, that's in the ethical realm. So they go together. And so it goes back to one of the major things that people need to know. You need to know what the law says about the practice of whatever you purport to be practicing. Typically, it says you need to have a license to use the word. I'll just, harp on psychology, 'cause that's sort of my kind of corner. To be a psychologist, to use the word psychology or have people portray you as a psychologist, you need to have a license. Uh, Otherwise, you're misleading people, and that is illegal. Actually, it's the use of a term that is a protected term.
Yeah.
The field of sport and exercise psychology has not necessarily been real tough on that. And many people engage in the practice of psychology or counseling or social work or marriage and family therapy without a license. It's a pervasive practice. One need not go very far, get on the good old internet, that mysterious series of tubes, as I say on the radio, and, you'll see people who portray themselves as all kinds of grand poobahs of performance and sports psychology. They need to be psychologists, or and they if they're going to use that, or if they say they're a sport counselor, whatever it may be. So know the law as well as know the ethics
Yeah,
code, and be sensitive to its myriad iterations or forms and challenges, which is perhaps impossible, but is reasonably doable. Uh, and I think linked to that too is if you don't know what it is, then you need to have someone you can consult with, and that's what an ASP ethics board, a California State Board of Counseling. These people are there to educate people. They're not
mm,
the counseling, psychology, marriage and family, social work, police. They don't go hunting people down. We did not do that in ASP. We received complaints from people who were practicing, many of whom were clients who they had a problem with a provider, or they were students who felt they were misused or whatever it might be, or they had questions about their own behavior, how they should portray themselves when they're entering into business or something like that.
yeah.
Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, but yeah.
I think important. You kind of in as a final thought, you said that you had a vision for the profession of sport and performance psychology. Could you articulate that?
Well, I'm not a visionary. As I portrayed myself, I just did stuff. So, I think that at least in terms of this class, people need to, number one, have a class that's taught by a knowledgeable person like yourself. They need to know what the law is. They need to know what their ethics codes are. They need to know themselves. That sounds like something old and Greek, right? Keep your ego in check, because a lot of people get involved in this field because they want to hang out with pros, or they want to work with Olympic athletes and all this kind of stuff. You need to understand what really your purpose is in terms of practice. So those are part of the things that I think about in terms of passing on something that's not necessarily visionary, but essential to one's professional practice and behavior, and sense of how one can go and do good work and not harm others.
Wow. You said that very clearly and very well. And Dr. Etzel, again, on behalf of all of my students and myself, I just really thank you for taking time out of your busy day to educate the young and upcoming sport and professional psychologists. Thank
You
you
bet.
so much.
Been a pleasure. Wish I could be there in person, but uh, I guess it is the 21st century. I've sort of forgotten about that. I'm a guy of the 60s and 70s, so I don't know.
Well,
But anyway, things do change, but they don't change that much. So, and if I could be of any help to people, feel free to nudge anybody. You have my email and stuff, or I don't know that I want to get a text from anybody, but
well, thank you
so
again,
you
and
bet.
have a great day.
Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. Bye-bye.